In a federal courtroom, Maya Delaney was publicly shamed and stripped of her right to defend her client, the system's way of silencing unwelcome truth. Judge Marcus Winslow, hiding behind rules, believed he could twist justice and ruin lives without consequences. But Maya had a move of her own. She uncovered secret communications and evidence, taking them to the FBI and setting off an explosive investigation. Just wait until you see how everything turned upside down, and why, in the end, justice could not be denied. The federal courthouse in downtown Richmond was formidable, a monument to the seriousness of justice, inlaid with marble floors and heavy oak benches. Even early in the morning, its corridors pulsed with a quiet energy, determined attorneys striding between rooms, nervous defendants wringing their hands, clerks lining up documents to be certified by the hour. For Maya Delaney, walking those halls once brought a surge of purpose. Today, every step seemed to echo with anticipation and warning. She was the youngest attorney in her firm, and one of only a handful of black women ever to argue a high-profile case before Judge Marcus Winslow. Inside the courtroom, Maya kept her chin up, gripping a folder crammed with notes, legal precedents, and statements. Her client, Eric Coleman, waited beside her at the defense table, fidgeting with his tie. She gave him a quick, encouraging nod. They both knew the stakes were high. Eric faced years in prison for a crime he adamantly denied. All eyes turned as Judge Winslow entered. He moved briskly, robes sweeping behind him, all business and command. From the first bang of the gavel, Maya detected the undercurrent of skepticism in his tone. He looked her up and down, expression unreadable, then called the court to order. Maya stood to begin her statement. "Your Honor, the defense will show—" But the judge's voice, sudden and sharp, overrode hers. "Miss Delaney, I trust you're aware this courtroom is not a platform for activism. Stick to the law. We run a tight ship here." A strange, uncomfortable hush swept the room. Maya blinked, momentarily stunned, then glanced at Eric. She knew the warning wasn't just about courtroom decorum. She was being reminded in front of the jury, the press, and her peers of her place. The bailiff's lips tightened. The court reporter hesitated, just a breath too long. Nevertheless, Maya pressed forward, voice unwavering as she outlined her opening argument. She cited statutes, pointed to evidence, weaving together the story of Eric's innocence. But every few sentences, Winslow interrupted. "Ms. Delaney, that is conjecture, not fact. Please remain on topic." He flagged her for phrasing, for the order of her exhibits, for speaking too directly to the jury. Each interruption forced a pause, each correction chipped away at her authority. Occasionally, Maya caught a juror's raised eyebrow, a whispered exchange between reporters on the press bench. It did not escape her that none of the other attorneys, seasoned, older, and almost exclusively white men, received such public admonishments. The assistant district attorney, Michael Grayson, was free to elaborate with anecdotes and editorial comments. When he misquoted a witness, the judge looked the other way. When Maya offered a well-rehearsed objection, Winslow dismissed it, unfazed. During a midday break, Maya sat alone on a bench in the hallway. Already snippets of the morning's humiliation circulated through courthouse gossip. She overheard a pair of legal clerks, she never stood a chance against him, and felt the weight of isolation sink in. Still, she refused to succumb to despair. Instead, she opened her notebook, reviewing each exchange and marking lines that needed tightening, arguments that could withstand disruption. When court resumed, Maya did not back down. She shifted tactics, relying even more on factual documentation, withdrawing emotion from her tone. Even so, Winslow managed to undercut her at every turn. Just before closing arguments could begin, he summoned Maya to the bench, speaking quietly, but with authority. "You're inflaming this courtroom, Miss Delaney. I advise moderation if you care about your client's outcome." The words, dressed as counsel, felt like warning and censure in equal measure. Hours later, when the session finally adjourned, Maya gathered her files methodically, refusing to grant the judge or the gallery any sign of discouragement. As she and Eric exited under the unblinking gaze of onlookers and reporters, she felt 100 eyes following. On the courthouse steps, Eric turned to her, his voice barely above a whisper. You did everything you could. Don't let him get to you." Those words lingered. Back at her apartment that evening, Maya replayed every moment Winslow's interruptions, the snickers from the gallery, her own measured responses. The injustice of the day gnawed at her. This wasn't just about losing an argument, or even about one client. It was about something larger, a system that could still find ways to silence the people who most challenged it. Despite the exhaustion and humiliation, Maya felt anger take root. It steadied her hands as she poured coffee and reached for her case files. She was sure of one thing: she would not let Judge Winslow's verdict be the last word, not for herself and not for those who came after her. The courthouse might reclaim its nightly quiet, but in Maya's mind the fight was only beginning. For days after her courtroom humiliation, Maya Delaney felt caught between exhaustion and disbelief. The events replayed in her mind during sleepless nights, a constant reminder of how swiftly the system could undermine even the most prepared advocate. The courthouse that had once seemed orderly and purposeful now appeared indifferent, its marble halls echoing with the unspoken truth that not everyone who entered was treated as an equal. Word of Maya's supposed conduct spread quickly. News briefs and courtroom bloggers framed her as reckless, emphasizing the judge's warnings over any argument she had made. Colleagues who once greeted her warmly now offered only nods, their eyes avoiding hers, as if proximity could put their own reputations at risk. The sense of isolation deepened. She overheard comments that stung, advice to stay in her lane, resigned mutterings that these cases never win. Maya found herself suddenly dismissed from Eric Coleman's defense, the official explanation citing a technical conflict of interest in paperwork. Her removal felt orchestrated, a procedural decision masking a warning. Eric tried to call, but the attorney-client line had been severed by court order. For Maya, it was as though the system had swept all traces of her contribution aside, treating her effort as an inconvenience rather than advocacy. At home, Maya kept her phone on silent to avoid the endless cycle of notifications, news alerts, messages, professional requests. With each passing day, her resolve warred against self-doubt. Night after night she returned to the same question. Was she truly making a difference, or merely risking everything for a battle predetermined to fail? But resignation was never Maya's way. Quiet moments brought new questions about the uneven enforcement of courtroom rules, the anecdotes from other attorneys who admitted, under their breath, to facing barriers they dared not confront publicly. Maya's anger turned inward, molding itself into determination. In the solitude of her small apartment, Maya began piecing together court records, transcripts, and her own notes. Something in the judge's pattern of behavior felt too deliberate. She reached out to old colleagues, discreetly requested anonymous stories from others who had stood before Judge Winslow and left discouraged or professionally harmed. Stories accumulated, painting a picture of repeated obstacles and surprising inconsistencies in case outcomes. As she sifted through evidence long into the night, Maya realized her humiliation was not an isolated incident. It was part of a system that often quietly, sometimes directly, closed its doors to those who pushed for change. The weight of defeat gradually shifted. Sorrow blended with clarity. She was not alone in her experience, and that simple truth rekindled her sense of purpose. Determined to uncover the truth, Maya set aside fear and began mapping connections, searching for hidden patterns. Her hope was fragile, a tentative glow in the darkness, but it was enough to keep her moving. In the days that followed, quiet persistence replaced visible struggle. The world outside remained unchanged, bustling with its routines, but in the privacy of her study, Maya crafted a plan to challenge what she could no longer ignore. In the weeks following her removal from Eric Coleman's case, Maya Delaney retreated into a relentless pursuit of answers, her private investigation transforming from a flicker of hope into a blazing mission. The quiet of her apartment was filled with the soft rustle of legal documents, the hum of her computer, and the occasional tap of fingers on her phone as she connected with sources who trusted her enough to share fragments of a disturbing reality hidden beneath the polished veneer of the federal court. Her first breakthrough came unexpectedly. A former court clerk named Tom Rivers, reached out after reading a brief online post where Maya hinted at undisclosed injustice. Tom was cautious, fearful of retaliation, but willing to talk. Over a series of encrypted emails and brief phone conversations, he began to share stories of Judge Marcus Winslow's questionable conduct. Rapid rulings favoring influential business interests, suppression of evidence, and moments that suspiciously aligned with private meetings away from the public eye. Each detail Tom provided was a crack in the facade Maya had long sensed but struggled to articulate. More importantly, it showed a pattern that extended far beyond her own case. Tom was a puzzle piece from inside the system, someone with first-hand knowledge of how power could bend the rules, and his voice breathed life into Maya's growing suspicion. Emboldened, Maya's network expanded. She contacted journalists who had covered courthouse corruption tangentially, attorneys who had quietly expressed frustration but avoided speaking out publicly, and investigators who had followed threads of judicial misconduct in other districts. She began compiling a meticulous dossier, names, dates, emails, transcripts, even recorded conversations obtained with consent, that slowly formed a tapestry of concealment and abuse of authority. But the deeper Maya delved, the more precarious her position became. Unmarked cars occasionally appeared near her apartment, and mysterious calls with silence on the other end grew frequent. A subtle message was clear. Her actions were being watched. Yet rather than intimidate her, these signs steeled her resolve. The most critical moment arrived when Maya obtained encrypted emails between Judge Winslow and a prominent real estate developer involved in several controversial court cases. The correspondence suggested an exchange of favors veiled in legal jargon, carefully hidden but undeniably present to the eye, trained to see beyond the surface. With this evidence in hand, Maya faced a dilemma. The sensitive nature of the information and the power of the accused meant she needed an ally she could trust absolutely. Turning to the FBI was a calculated risk. The agency's mandate to uphold federal law made it the only institution capable of launching a credible investigation. But could she trust them to take her seriously? The initial meeting was tense. The lead agent was skeptical. After all, allegations against a sitting federal judge were rare and dangerous territory. Maya presented her evidence clearly, her voice steady, despite the weight of what was at stake. The documents, electronic communications, and corroborating witness accounts painted a damning picture of corruption and abuse of power. As the agents sifted through the details, the atmosphere shifted. What had seemed like a long shot suddenly transformed into an active inquiry. Maya's role moved from outsider to vital informant. She was no longer alone. In the weeks that followed, the FBI carefully built their case alongside Maya's assistance. Surveillance discreetly monitored the judge's activities, financial records were subpoenaed, and more witnesses came forward, emboldened by the growing momentum. Maya found herself teetering on a precipice caught between exhilaration and fear. The man who had embarrassed her, disrupted her career, and denied justice to others was now under federal scrutiny. Every day brought new revelations, each more unsettling than the last, but also brought Maya closer to the justice she so desperately sought. Amid all this turmoil, Maya's sense of purpose grew clearer than ever. She was no longer fighting just to restore her own dignity. She was battling to expose a system-wide betrayal that compromised the very ideals she had pledged to uphold. The scales of justice, though tipped for so long, were beginning to balance again. The story of a determined woman, once humiliated and pushed aside, sharing her secret evidence with the FBI, spread quietly but powerfully among legal circles. Maya Delaney had turned her anger into action and revealed a truth too long veiled in darkness. The courtroom that had once humiliated her would soon bear witness to an investigation that promised to reshape its shadows. Through it all, Maya held tightly to her conviction. Corruption could not endure forever, especially when confronted by courage and truth. The fight was far from over, but now the scales had at least begun their slow, steady tilt towards justice. The news broke like a thunderclap in the city. Senatorial hearings were scheduled, and federal investigators announced formal charges against Judge Marcus Winslow. The man who had once stood as an unassailable figure in the courtroom now faced the weight of public scrutiny and legal peril. For Maya Delaney, this moment was the culmination of months of relentless effort and unwavering resilience. As the investigation unfolded, details emerged that stunned many. Winslow was accused of betraying his oath through corruption and manipulation, using his privileged position to sway cases and silence dissenting voices. The evidence Maya had uncovered, coupled with the FBI's rigorous inquiry, left little room for doubt. It was a clear demonstration that no individual, no matter how powerful, was beyond accountability. Maya found herself thrust into the spotlight, not as a courtroom figure silenced by authority, but as a courageous truth-teller whose determination had set justice into motion. Invitations for interviews and speaking engagements arrived, but she approached them with measured humility, focused on the real victory, the restoration of fairness for those wronged. One crisp morning, Maya returned to the courthouse steps, the place where she had once felt diminished and disregarded. The familiar stones seemed different now, echoing with a new energy of possibility. Reporters waited for her there, eager for a statement. Maya's voice was calm, but it carried the strength of conviction. "This is not just my victory," she said. "It is a victory for everyone who has ever been made to feel voiceless by a system that should protect them. It is proof that accountability matters, that integrity needs champions. I hope this moment inspires others to stand firm, to seek truth, and to believe in justice." Her words seemed to resonate beyond the crowd, an anthem for change, for hope, for courage. In the aftermath, reforms were proposed to increase transparency in the judiciary, and new protocols were established to ensure impartial oversight and protect the rights of defendants regardless of background. Maya took a position on a committee advising on these changes, determined that the humiliation she endured would serve as a foundation for meaningful progress. Though the road ahead remained long and many challenges still lay in wait, Maya's spirit was unshaken. She had turned humiliation into empowerment, defeat into a rallying cry, anger into justice. The courtroom that once rejected her was now a symbol of transformation. Her story, marked by setbacks and breakthroughs, had a profound impact not only within the legal community, but also in the hearts of those who dreamed of fairness in a complicated world. Through persistence, courage, and faith in the power of truth, Maya had shown that one person's voice could echo through the halls of power and change the course of history. As she walked away from the courthouse that day, Maya Delaney carried with her not just the satisfaction of a hard-won battle, but a luminous hope, one that would inspire future generations to stand tall, no matter the obstacles, and to believe fiercely in justice's enduring promise.